If you're watching on Twitch, hello. If you're watching in the future on YouTube, I'm actually recording this live on Twitch. This is a present moment, even though when you maybe you're watching this, it'll be the past. But this is going to be episode 2 of the speedrun. I've reconfigured the overlay a little bit. I have a duck behind me who's blindfolded, who maybe doesn't want to witness the destruction that's about to happen. But the goal, as usual, is to be instructive, to try and just show what it takes to beat players at different rating levels. I gained 47 points from the first 2 games I played. I'm 447. I'm not sure how many games I'll play in this episode, but should be fun, and I think we'll waste no more time. Let's hop in. Playing Ivan Nico. E4, rated just below 400. And I'm going to play kind of the standard classical openings that I would recommend for a player in this rating level. Is just to play normal chess, king's pawn opening, defend the pawn. We have a Ruy Lopez. Now, against the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish, there's already a lot of moves black can play. A6 is by far the most common, but there's also knight f6, which is called the Berlin. And then there's sidelines too, like d6 or g6 or knight e7. I'm gonna stick with like the main approach. Challenge the bishop. After the game, I'll show what happens if white wanted to snag the pawn. But for now, yeah, bishop a4, it's the main line. Yeah, for now, what do I want to do? I'm gonna play d6. This is a more solid approach, just reinforcing e5. And yeah, I don't want to be like overly fancy in the opening, so I'm just gonna like go through with opening principles, try and castle as quickly as possible. One of the downsides with d6 is it does prevent the bishop from coming to c5, but at the same time, the bishop is very fine here because it helps diffuse a potential pin if we do see bishop g5. And so far, my opponent's playing very, very well for the rating. Like, if I didn't know the rating, I would maybe think that white could be at least 2,000 plus. But sometimes this is common to see that players of this rating, they'll play the opening fine and then make mistakes later. So with this trade, bishop takes c6, pawn takes c6. I have double pawns, which isn't always the best thing. Like double pawns are notoriously powerful and causes the opponent to resign instantly. Oh, that's kind of disappointing. What happened to my opponent? It wasn't even like a winning position. Like my opponent clearly didn't rage resign or rage quit. If anything, like white is probably doing fine. Do I have an eval bar? Yeah, the eval is just about equal. I was gonna say that this trade probably favors black a little bit because I get the bishop pair, which can be valuable long term, and the pawn coming closer to the center is quite nice. But yeah, I think I'll I'll hop into another game shortly. I just want to provide one like very basic beginner lesson in the Spanish. And if you're playing this position as black, you should know what to do after takes, takes, and takes. Because this is something a lot of beginners go for. It looks like a free pawn for white. I imagine there's a lot of people watching on Twitch who know the move. If you're watching in the future on YouTube and you don't know what to do here, it's a good time to pause the video and try and find the best move for black. Good job to a lot of people saying queen d4. This is one of these times that you can basically make an exception to the opening principle of, in this case, bringing out your queen early. Generally, you shouldn't bring out your queen early, but here there's a very good reason. Attack the knight, attack the pawn. And black is guaranteed to win back the pawn, pretty much. Assuming white saves the knight, and take. And this is already much better for black. Because if queen e2, we're happy to trade. Two bishops, pretty open position, easy development. White's king is on e2, which will eventually be victim to a rook coming to e8. So, yeah, it kind of breaks my heart that we didn't get a full game and more lessons, but at least I can try and provide a mini lesson. So, there's a question, why not queen e7? Queen e7 is actually, that's a good question. Queen e7, it's an attempt to win back the pawn, but it runs into d4. And then black is kind of struggling to regain material. And generally, you don't want to play a move like f6, which can be quite weakening. Like even if you do win back the pawn, in this case, this is a bit different because you weaken yourself and white's developing very rapidly. So I hope that makes sense. And I could keep going down the rabbit hole. Inevitably, there's probably someone wondering about queen h5 check, which would actually be in black's favor because here, black would win a piece. So yeah, chess can be very complex. Sometimes there's multiple layers to go down in different variations. But okay, let's move on and try and get another game against someone who wants to play. I know some people, they start games and then they get like a pizza delivery or their parents call them downstairs for dinner. So it's part of life. So we have a Caro-Kann. I'm gonna play an opening that I recommend against Caro-Kann. It's called the two knights attack. Assuming black plays d5, black doesn't play d5, so I'm actually already in like unfamiliar territory. The knight of 6 is interesting. It's like combining a Caro-Kann and an Alekhine's defense. Sometimes the downside of knight of 6 so early is it walks into e5. And I think in this case, e5 is the most principled move. Like gain space, attack the knight. And generally early on, you don't want to move the same piece twice, because then it just slows down the development of your other pieces. So my goal going forward is to improve my position while attacking the knight. So like if the knight moves here, I can kick it again with d3. Moves here, I can play h3. Knight d5 is probably the most likely move. And then I can consider c4 or d4. Opponent was taking their time. Okay, so we see knight e4. And yeah, we're gonna play a game of hacky sack. Just keep kicking the thing. Keep making it move. A little bit of soccer. Some people call it football. And this can already be like kind of annoying for black to deal with because the knight's almost trapped. Interesting. Queen a5. Wow. Okay, I was not actually expecting that move, but that's interesting because black is trying to provoke me to play a move to block the check with a minor piece. And if I block with any minor piece, knight's ready to take. And I don't want to give black like an easy route of kind of getting the knight off the board and being able to trade it. So I think it's probably best here to block with the pawn. And this very simply gets out of check and leaves black in the same predicament. Now, if we look a little bit further here, like again, the knight doesn't have too many options. I'm controlling these retreating squares, controlling g5 multiple times. It looks like the only safe square is c5. But with inclusion of queen a5, if black goes for this, then white's going to have a move to guarantee win either the knight or the queen. And I'll hold off on saying it until we see knight c5. It's possible black will do something else. Yeah, so the simple move to win material is a pawn fork. Usually knights are the ones who are like known to deliver the most forks, but pawns are also pretty good at forking. And this is pretty much maximum punishment for black disobeying a few opening principles. Like brought out the knight into trouble, brought out the queen early, and the pieces kind of instantly ran into the fork tactic. So showing no mercy here. Won the knight for the pawn. The queen still attacked. But the game goes on. And it's important in positions like this to not celebrate too early. Still keep principles in mind. King safety is important. The plan going forward is definitely to bring in more pieces. I'll probably use a queen as maybe a punching bag. I like this move c4. Very simply attacking the queen. And the queen can't take the pawn because my knight defends. So this move almost traps the queen. There is, as far as I could see, there's only one safe square for the black queen. But I should address the pawn tension too. So black saves the queen. And now there are two attackers. I only have one defender. And generally, I'll try and use this position as an instructive moment, because usually when a pawn is attacking another pawn, you do have a few choices. You can either take, or you can reinforce your own pawn. In some cases, you can push, but not in this case. Another thing that comes to mind, I think this is really important to address, is the queen and king are aligned on the open file. So that makes me think about rook e1. Now, it's a question if I want to play rook e1 first or if I want to take first. I think I actually want to take first. So I'm setting up a small trap. If black takes back with this pawn, then the queen and king are a lot more exploitable. Rook e1 would then pin the queen to the king. Pawn takes pawn seems like the most natural move which opponent plays. So no mercy. I think we're going to see this a lot in like the early games of the speedrun, is when the queen and king for the opponent are aligned. Usually you want to look for ways to exploit them, especially on the open file. And this is one reason you want to castle early on. You don't want your king to be a target in the center. So open files in the center are the most likely to open. I should say the files in the center are the most likely to open early in the game. Okay, so that was pretty quick, 11 moves. I guess I should define, like, assuming there's a lot of like newer players watching, an open file is basically a file with no pawns on it. There's also a half open file. It's a file with just one pawn on it. So the D file is half open for white. And generally early on, you want to look to put your rooks on open files or half open files. So, okay, I think that was pretty instructive. Like showing how to just try and punish these early knight moves. Basically improving while attacking is a nice strategy. And I'm already like nearing this 500 rating mark. So I think I'll keep going until I hit 500, and then maybe wrap it up for episode 2. So let's go again. Playing, I don't want to hurt myself pronouncing this name. Playing someone from Mexico. And yeah, for a lot of the games at these like early rating levels, I'm going to stick with just basic openings. In this case, we have a 3 knights. I'll make it a 4 knights. When I was first learning chess, like almost every game I played would reach a position very similar to this. And bishop c4, it's one of the most common moves at the lower level. And I think this will be a good example to show the center fork trick. Because even though bishop c4, it's like the most natural looking move, of course aiming at the f7 pawn, it's not a recommended move in this specific position because of knight takes e4. And if you played this this 4 knights from the black side, this is a very useful idea to keep in mind. Because even though I just gave away a knight for a pawn, I'm winning it back. Get the pawn fork. And this is basically a fancy way of trading pieces. Because, okay, white's guaranteed to lose either the knight or the bishop. We'll likely get the pawn for it. And then it'll be equal material. But the reason why this is preferable for black is it's going to lead to more central control. And in this case, it leads to me having the bishop pair, which is very nice in a relatively open position. After the game, I can show some other variations. I know someone's asking about bishop takes f7, which is definitely important to address. But knight c3, attacking the queen. There's a couple options for the queen. Queen d8 is a perfectly fine move. I don't want to play a move like queen d6 or queen d7 because it would block one of the bishops. I think the move I'll go for is queen a5. I will say I usually go for queen d8, but queen a5, it's a little bit more active. It is risky in the fact that I'm having my queen out in the open. Maybe you could run into like a3 b4 or d3 bishop d2, but white can't exploit it right away. And thankfully this isn't spell chess, so opponent can't jump over and take the queen. And we see pawn d4. Interesting. So pawn d4, that's a very confrontational move. And one thing I'm noticing, both kings are in the center, and if the center opens up, it could get tricky for both of us. And this is a case where I have a bunch of options. This is another good example of when the pawn is attacking my pawn, I could consider pushing because the knight's pinned, so it's not actually controlling e4. Or I could leave the tension and do something else, like bishop g4 maybe, or bishop b4. There's a lot of choices here. I definitely don't want to overcomplicate things. The idea of taking is nice because white has to take, and then I have another move to dictate play. I could consider something like queen e5 there. Also, in general, I'm going to go ahead and take. There's a general principle is when you have two bishops, in this case it's two bishops versus knight and bishop, the two bishops very much prefer open positions. And the more pawns that are traded, the more open the position becomes, especially when the center pawns are traded. So do I take again and allow the queen to come in? I remember when I was like young and first learning chess, I would make an effort to provoke my queen or my opponent's queen out into the center early in the game because I thought it would be bad for them to have the queen in the center. But in this case, if I take and take, the queen's actually like pretty powerful. And it's hard to exploit. Like takes, and then bishop c5 runs into this. So I don't want to get tied down. I'm looking at the other options too. I mean, queen e5 is interesting, but queen e5 kind of just helps white develop. I'm spending a lot of time here. Opponent's playing well for the rating, at least so far. I have an idea to take, and then bishop e6, and then prepare rook d8. Even though my bishop will be tied down, there will be ways to attack the queen. I think that's probably the simplest line, like relieve the tension right away, and then focus on development. I think a lot of players would make the mistake of developing their dark squared bishop and just forgetting about the pawn. But it's so important, like especially at the lower levels, before you make a move, you want to ask yourself if you're leaving things undefended or exploitable. So in this case, there's really nothing white can try and exploit. And yeah, let's get the rook to the fully open file. Now white has some choices. White could force a queen trade. Queen a4 was possible, but I wouldn't mind like going into the endgame. Now let's go for bishop c5. Moves like rook d8 and bishop c5, it's what we call developing with tempo, or simply developing with attack. You improve a piece, you attack the opponent, and in doing so, you gain time. Because for a couple moves in a row, white's moving the queen rather than developing the other pieces. And now this is very instructive. I think a lot of players would just instantly castle. They see their pawns attacked. And yeah, castling looks like a very, very fine move. But it's so important to be tactically alert and notice the queens are aligned. And unfortunately for my opponent, they walked into a pretty nasty idea. Bishop takes f2. Especially when the queen is in the center and not defended, you want to look for ways to exploit it. And bishop f2 comes with check, and now the queen is lost. So no mercy. Opponent played really well up until allowing that. And even the blunder was not an obvious blunder by any means. Okay, so now, yeah, it's important to take as much as I can and give nothing back in return. Like usually in real life, you want to be generous and kind to others. But in a chess game, it's okay to be greedy. No mercy. So pinning the rook. I probably still want a castle. It's like the best way to get this rook into the game. Also have to be aware of time. I'm taking more time than usual just to try and explain things a little bit more thoroughly. But there's no increment, so have to watch the clock. Thank you, Photo Chess, for the raid. Yeah, for anyone just tuning in, this is one of the first games on my speedrun account. This is going to be episode 2 of the speedrun series for YouTube. Yeah, let's get this rook to the open file. Even though the rook is blocked by the bishop, we still consider it an open file because once the bishop moves, and it has more scope to enter the game. And yeah, positions when you're up a lot of material. In this case, I'm up a queen for a knight. I'm really in no rush to try and checkmate, or even to try and win more material. I'm just improving my pieces, making sure things will be ready for any like confrontational moves. Usually when your pieces are on good squares, then tactics will be more available. Okay, let's move the queen. Let's move the queen to the... Although if I play queen h5, I lose c7. Okay, let's move the queen to c6. Safe move. Attacking the knight, keeping the pawn defended. Maybe someday I can make use of the light square weaknesses in white's kingside. Okay, yeah, no mercy. Opponent perhaps missed the knight was attacked. Or maybe just wanted to deflect my queen so they could win the pawn. Let's save the rook. And it's still a question how to like orchestrate a checkmate. I really like my bishop on h3 as it takes away the g2 square. And at some point I'd like to like crash through on the back rank. And probably to do that, it requires doubling up the rooks. When you have 2 rooks in the same file, then it makes it easier to infiltrate. Okay, queen's attacked. Let's go back to c6. Threatening checkmate. Earlier we saw my queen being attacked. I moved to a square to attack something else, and my opponent missed it. Really at the I'd say sub 800 level, players very often will miss the long distance moves. So it requires having board vision, like the ability to see the whole board. And for white, there's not too many ways to defend. That is a way to defend. Now I can snag the bishop. Now this position actually brings back a really painful memory. It was my second ever tournament. And I had a position like this with the black pieces, like up a ton of things. It seemed like I was on my way to victory. It was the second round of, I forget what city. It was like a Chicago area scholastic tournament. And I was playing a 4-year-old. Like I took everything except one of his rooks. And what he ended up doing was back rank checkmating me. Like he got a situation, his rook came down, and even though I was up so much material, I just lost. It was so disappointing. Not only to lose to a 4-year-old, but to lose when up so much material. So we might see white try to get the rook in play. Usually the easiest way to avoid back rank mate is to make Luft. Or make air for the king. Like move one of the pawns, g6 or h6. Give the king some breathing room. Opponent doubles up. Okay, let's come in here. Yeah, now there's one legal move, and this will end the game. So no mercy that game. But big kudos to my opponent. Like, actually played a very fine opening. Made me think a lot. Like, had some interesting decisions in the early middle game. And then the one tactical blunder was not obvious. This, I mean, Queen e5 looked like a nice centralizing move. It just wasn't aware of the danger on the 5th rank. So, hey, I crossed 500. So let's end the video for YouTube with some takeaway lessons from this game. I know there were a lot of questions in Twitch chat about maybe the early stages of the opening. When you take on e4, there are options for white, and it's good to be prepared for what white can do. I think a few people were asking about bishop takes f7, which when I was first learning this opening from black, I was terrified of this move. It looks scary. That white takes the pawn, exposes the king, wins back the piece. So it's equal material here. The thing to understand about this position is black is actually much for choice because the king isn't really a weakness if white can't exploit it. And black is taking over the center with pawn d5. And even if white delivers a check, the king's going to hide on g8. I know it's ugly to maybe lose casting rights, but the king's super safe here. Moves like h6 and e4 are coming. Having the bishop pair with 2 center pawns is a very good advantage. So, yeah, bishop f7, nothing to be afraid of. And then here, yeah, there's a few other moves. Like, a lot of players will play bishop b5 to pin the knight. And then there's a useful idea that we take the knight, and if white takes back, it looks a little bit scary that the knight's attacked twice and pinned. But here there's a very strong move, queen d5. Defending, attacking, attacking. And then black is also for choice in this position. So I don't want to make this episode too long, so I think I'll end it there. If people are watching in the future on YouTube and you still have questions or comments or feedback, leave it below. Don't forget to follow on Twitch. At least one person on Twitch says, hi, YouTube. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in episode 3. Stay tuned.